I'd just like to say it's worth remembering that the French Revolution was immediately preceded by hyperinflation.
And Napoleon taking over afterwards. But
Exactly.
I also wanted to share a story. I was also reminded by David's accent. It seems like a long time ago now, but way back in 2012, I went to Burning Man, and this artist had set up this incredible display here. As you can see, the Bank of America neon sign is still on. You can see the Goldman Sachs. But this is Wall Street. And as you can see, something's starting to happen to Wall Street. We might skip ahead a little with our incredible technologies of the now. But Wall Street's on fire and Wall Street's burning. And I remember watching this, but not filming it because I'd run out of batteries on my camera. So I announced to everyone there, I said, well, I'm not going to be able to film this. Someone else will have to be in charge. And later on, after Wall Street had burnt, I met another man with a French accent, and he was very moved by this, maybe even to tears sitting on the ground. And we asked him why he was so moved. And he said, now that I've seen it, I believe it can happen, that Wall Street can burn down, and that we could have new financial overlords, maybe not banks this time, maybe people. But this is just an image from 2012 of Wall Street burning.
Man, I mean, go to Wall Street and I mean, who was it? What's the name of the artist who was on before? What's his name?
Vesa?
Yeah, and he said that no good art comes from the legacy financial system. The Fearless Girl is like one of my favorite pieces of art. It's incredible. Like this tiny little frail girl, like facing off this huge Wall Street bull, which is like looming towards her. But I mean, I think it's such an iconic piece of art because it shows that you can have large economic force which gets beaten back by something which seems so frail, so yeah, I wanted to like chime that in when he said that there was no decent art which came out of the sort of legacy financial system. I was like, well, it's the Fearless Girl. That's the only thing I can think of.
This is
spectacular.
This is a meme.
What's that?
This is a meme I made. Can you see it?
Some of it showing looks pretty bright though.
Tom, I've sent it to you on WhatsApp.
All right.
You might be able to show it.
Yeah, get it up. I mean, we obviously we put a Lightning Network hat on the when we did the Lightning Network hack day in New York on Wall Street. We put one of those hats on the girl as well, so we've got some pretty nice snaps of that.
All right, Nindy, go ahead. Tell us about the meme.
Yeah, it's just a meme that I made a few months ago when Lagarde said something, and it's on the meme.
And it says,
that's interesting.
Your favorite French lady.
Says, let them eat cake, and it has Marie Antoinette, and below it, it has LaGuardia, and she says, we should be happier to have a job than to have our savings protected.
Whoa!
So, I like that.
So you see, there is a theory like that. You see, when they started banning cigarettes everywhere, they selected countries that were potentially easier to manage and to handle the test bed. And I believe they did the same with Greece. They started that thing with Greece originally, and I actually believe that they're going to do it everywhere. In fact, my friend that is from Lebanon told me about a month and a half ago, maybe a little bit more, but it was definitely this year. He was really worried because mom's savings, were in the bank, and she couldn't touch it. And they gradually every week they were telling them they could withdraw less and less, and ultimately they ended up being frozen. So I don't know how the situation has developed now, but you're right. Going back to Victoria's point earlier and the stories you were saying, it's when the shit happened that I actually realized, my God, this is possible. They can actually do that. Definitely, it's scary, right? Because you live in some sort of reality that can be wiped out just like that. And I think that's one of the big power of Bitcoin. But we know that. But it's important to always remember the power,
I think it's absolutely right, realizing that. And, this kind of situation has happened several times throughout history. And of course, in the past, when things like hyperinflations happened, the public didn't have access to things like gold because it was already held by the governments and there was none in circulation. But this time around, because Bitcoin has been adopted by the general public and there are pockets of that kind of information, it's going to be much easier to get it into circulation this time. I think Bitcoin gives us a great degree of hope for the future that we wouldn't have had if it hadn't existed.
Cool.
Yeah.
You just need an opt-out. We just need a non-proprietary opt-out to. I mean, we have, if you don't want to run Windows, then you can run Linux, and you just download it for free, use it for free, whatever. Comment on it, if you think there should be something which improved, or maybe contribute some code. But we don't have that for money, and that's crackers. We need that for money, and then just sort of see where the chips fall. See which people eventually opt for. I mean, I think just like monopolies. So say if you have look at web servers, for example. If we had a monopoly of web servers which were Microsoft based, then we would all have a problem with that. But if they're all Linux based, then we don't really have a problem with that because Linux is free and open source software. And I think that's similar to money. If we have a monopoly of money, which is free and open source, I don't think we have a problem with that. I think if we have a monopoly of money, which is proprietary and leans towards certain, political ideas and something like the US dollar, then people have a problem with that. And eventually, they'll move towards money with more liberty attached to it.
Yep. I'm tired.
Oh yeah.
I don't have anything left. I still got 97 people watching us in the chat though. I don't know if we want to keep going forever. We could always replay
going.
last time's Halving show. Well, I'll let you drive the
Yeah.
show, Ben. Watch out.
I'm in it for the long run.
I'll go lay
So is
down.
my
I'm
cat.
at
This is
6
the
I'm at
Halving,
6
man.
hours here.
Yeah.
So
I got my fucking Richard Hart nappy on. I'm ready.
Just go and have a nap. Leave us
I-
on. Leave us on. Go and
I've
have a nap.
got a question for Chris.
go
I
ahead.
used to watch this show years ago, and you were on it all the time, and you've took quite a break from it. Are you going to come back to the show?
I could be persuaded.
Question.
I think I could be persuaded.
That'd be brilliant. That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
We got piles and piles of money.
Chris, come back. Damn it.
Yeah, but Tom, you understand by now, you must be sick of me saying it. It's never about the money or the views or any of that. I was always inspired by the community and the people that showed up. This was never a channel. Sorry to repeat myself, but this was never a fucking channel that was going to go viral, that was going to grow 10,000, 20,000,
but it
40,000,
did.
all these.
It did.
It was never going to be that. You've got to be the person you were best going to be. And if you want to manufacture a YouTube account and you want to play that game and you want to get on the metrics, that's fine. But I think YouTube was never going to be encouraging of alternative political views. You're promoting it unless you do what Tone Bays does, which is do the conference circuit. You make yourself into a personality. That's all great. Yeah, 59.9K subscribers is fine. But usually when a YouTube account is this old, if you're trying to do the growth thing, if you're trying to do the growth hacking thing, that's a totally different mindset to where I think you originally started it off, where you just got people that were wanting to get involved because they grokked something, they felt something. And actually now I come back and I tune in now and again, I like check in on things. It's still that. You saw people like Victoria, people like Ben, the guy that was speaking I need to be introduced properly to. These people feel it. They feel it in their bones. And this was, this is always about just people relating to one another and not about going viral, hashtag. That was never what this was.
Yeah, but it's nice to have some viewers. When you make a show, it's nice to have some people watch it. And I know I've seen it happen and I've seen it go down. And then also, if you compare yourself, I agree. The really popular videos are buy Bitcoin now, become a millionaire, all capital letters. Like, we never did that. I mean, we've tried and all these things, the clickbait or whatever. We try whatever will work. But no, I think, I mean, the long run here, we're a lot more like PBS or NPR, public broadcasting, where it has an educational value. Ours kind of has a DIY feeling because you can do this on the internet. You don't need a giant corporation or any kind of backing. I mean, my computer's overheating here, but that's all we have is a computer and a camera and stuff. So we're working on that, but it's just about having shows and people that want to do shows. And then I think if you have audience and people comment on your shows, it motivates people to do more shows. And then, people have their own motivations of why they do things. So
I think the important thing to remember, Tom, is when the historians look back to these videos in 100 years' time, 200 years' time, they'll be looking at your show and digging that for information, not the other price monkeys.
Well, I hope so. And I think we made a really good and creative show today. We talked about a lot of different subjects, and we had Adam Back and Jameson and Ugly Old Goat, and we just had a lot of different discussions. So I think we did really well today.
Hey, I've got to say, I'm super happy with everyone, how they come together. I've just been on multiple channels all over the web, and it's incredible to see the energy around Bitcoin. It's really such a beautiful time to be alive, and then ending up here at the World Crypto Network. Bloody great.
How's that gin going, Josh?
Oh, mate, it's going wonderful. Jesus Christ, Satoshi, you've done it for me, mate. You've done it for me. It's a Tuesday.
Somewhere I got to find my picture of that gin. I had some of that gin in Barcelona or something, and I think it's all gone.
No, you had it at Blockchain Hotel.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
And Romania. Oh man, Romania. I miss Romania.
Oh, I miss flying. I miss you guys.
It'd be nice to go anywhere.
Do you remember when we used to fucking fly together and hug each other? And
Yeah. You know what? Screw the fucking corona. I'll still hug you, man.
Oh, I know.
Oh, brilliant.
That's what I'm going to do too until I get the damn thing, and then it's all everything's off. I'll never touch anyone again.
You just need it once. It's like, hey, touch a candle. It's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's all you need. It'll teach you up.
You'll get some antibodies. You'll be all right.
Take vitamin C.
Yeah.
Vitamin D too.
Just go to Marseille. This is where the most aware scientist on communicable disease is based.
In where?
Marseille, in south of France.
Didn't they help the Chinese actually build the lab in Wuhan?
Yes.
The one that is suspected. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, they did.
Because they were originally, the French actually helped the lab in Wuhan develop so that they could protect against SARS viruses. Oh, like how ironic. What a coincidence that there just happens to be this lab in Wuhan where the outbreak happened, and it just happened to be there, post SARS, and yet here we have another SARS virus. So
it's so funny to see reports saying, "Oh, I wonder where it came from. I wonder." Well, hang on a minute. You've got a lab like a stone's throw away from Wuhan, and you're like, "Oh, I wonder maybe it could have come from there."
Wait, guys, we might get kicked off of YouTube if I don't want Tom to get World Crypto Network banned. We support everything that comes out of WHO.
It's the size of the lab as well. When you see the size of the lab, and it's not a small lab. Like
it's not from the lab. It's not from the lab. I think Chris is right.
Yeah,
and more importantly,
whatever they're saying, I agree with. And
we all know that YouTube is being managed by algorithms now. So if you got deleted on YouTube, it's because of an algorithm. And on all this health stuff, I know it's not popular or whatever, but I kind of see YouTube's side in this. If you're out there and you're a doctor, but you're saying the opposite of what all the other doctors are saying, it's a little liable for YouTube to be hosting your content. So I can kind of see their side.
Why? It's important.
But it's a health issue, though. You can't be.
How does Thomas Hunt always end up taking the side of the big fan companies?
Because it's a health issue, man. I mean, I see it from their perspective.
Using their service, like, so it makes sense to not expect anything less from them. Like, why would you expect anything less than
they have to cover their butt? I mean, this is Google. Like, and that's the thing. Everyone has this false idea. Oh, it's YouTube. That means it's us. Oh, we own it. It's YouTube. Oh, it's from the internet. I mean, it means we own it. No, the last thing we owned was like Unix and Linux, even Linux, and the ability to chat on Linux and the ability to have, all these things. We had protocols for that. Then everyone got tired and lazy of using that. And they were just like, just let Facebook run the messaging. We don't need AIM or any of those protocols. We don't need anything that shares. Just let one company run it all. Let YouTube run all the videos. We don't need a standard for
And then we
videos.
got the Cambridge Analytica and 100.
What could possibly go wrong?
That's right. That's what we get.
But really, it was only maybe 2 weeks ago where I really dropped Google. I finally dropped Google because I was looking for natural health solutions. And I'm used to the internet where you're like typing something and you get a bunch of different sources from all over the place. And some of it's total crap. And some of it's really good. And some of it's not quite good, but total crap. And you start to gain sources and you pull in evidence and you start to research. This is not available anymore. When you search on Google, you get CDC, WHO, CDC, .gov. You only get that stuff. It's extremely hard. I've had to go to the great lengths to find different sources to even do some research, some basic research. Even libraries were not controlled like this. You could go into a library and research from total crazies, and you're living in a dictatorship if you're not being offended, if you're not seeing fake news, this whole notion of we've got to get rid of fake news, that's a dictatorship.
I mean, but for search engine optimization, just to take the other side of the argument, like the WHO do have some of the best, information out there, and they have at any one time during this whole crisis.
That you're okay to fly a plane? That it's not human to human control?
They also said the opposite too. They did.
That's what they also
said. This is all like in retrospect stuff. Like
but it was pretty obvious to me. Even to me,
the evidence which they had as scientists, they said, okay, with the evidence we've got, we cannot say that wearing homemade masks is a good idea.
I mean, I agree. Like maybe the evidence.
Guys, let's get back to Bitcoin. Come on.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah,
I was just enjoying the troll right there. Sorry.
I love the troll, man. It's great. No, but it's important. It's important to have a discussion because really, the WHO for me is too centralized in terms of communications authority. The WHO.
The whole world is looking at this tiny little organization. Who've got
it's a political organization, by the way.
$2 billion a year, which is fuck all.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be giving advice to the rest of the world. And their advice, by the way, go on Wayback Machine and look at the advice they were giving in January. And the advice was social distancing, self-quarantining. And there was good advice. So
that is good advice.
The WHO isn't the enemy. The enemy, is the crazy fucking president dictator who's advising people it's just a cold and you shouldn't be worried and blah blah blah. Like the WHO's the least of our worries. Like why are we all fucking going nuts over the World Health?
We need to blame someone, Ben. We need to blame someone. Come on.
Trump. He's a fucking idiot. Blame Boris. And it's like Cheltenham and shake hands policy.
I shook hands with everybody. It was great.
Like, Jesus.
And come on, the WHO have made so many good songs. My Generation, Pinball Wizard.
I knew you were going to make that joke.
The New Boss. Meet the New Boss. He's the same as the old boss. That's a WHO lyric. Come on.
Yeah, there was a news article, and it was like, who is going to be the new leader of North Korea? And I read it, and I was like, what the fuck? The World Health Organization is going to be the
moving up in the world.
The word who, Hugh.
Yeah, Teenage Wasteland. People are listing more Who songs in the chat. They're giving me material now.
The point is that centralized organizations really have some sort of perspective, and that's fine. But the main perspective that we're getting on a search engine now is one perspective. And to be able to just say, hey, there are other search engines, and really search engines are what are showcasing info and truth.
Yeah. Oh, what was I going to say? No idea. Oh, I remember. Yeah, you have to switch to DuckDuckGo or whatever instead of using Google. It reminds me of during the Iraq War. I wanted more information about what was going on, and as an American, I actually had to go over and read The Guardian, and you had to read UK newspapers if you wanted any actual information. So there have been historic examples of this in the past. Shout out to DJ Booth, who just joined us in the chat. Good morning, Australia. We've been checking out
I don't know how
Bitcoin.
I really don't know how to do that.
We've been checking out Bitcoin all day, all night long. Bitcoin was great, but yeah, there was a bit of a question mark there when it came up and it said happy having, not happy havening. So I don't know about that. I think DJ Booth has some work to do. You've got 4 years to do it though, so we got a lot of time for you to fix that little
DJ
typo
Booth.
there. So happy having to Australia too.
Go the Aussies, hey?
Josh
well,
from
DJ
Australia
Booth.
right here.
All
Pretty
right.
pretty amazing
Chris Ellis. So
worldwide chat we've had
finding
here.
reputable news sources in all of this craziness. I've taken to DW News on YouTube. DW News, they seem to be a German news outlet.
Deutsche
Are they-
Welle,
are-
represent.
they
Die
know
Welt, yeah.
Good.
Well, they're the state TV in Germany. I mean, I also have watched them, but largely because they have the biggest English distribution of German news. So
That's right,
my
yeah.
German, meine Deutsch is Kaka, so I can't understand the native Deutsch. But yeah, they actually seem really good. They've got their own version of Hard Talk. And Hard Talk, for those of you who don't know, is a BBC format where you have someone like Stephen Sacco, like a hard-hitting journalist who asks tough questions of global leaders and corporate CEOs, executives, etc. So they have their own version of that, which I really enjoyed. And they have their own version. They have a show called Shift, which looks at technological innovations, like a weekly or so show. Yeah, I enjoy it, but it is state-funded media, and I think that you do need a heterodox approach to news. In order for the news to be honest, you need an accountability, you need people to be tested, and you can't really get that if you just have one source of information. DuckDuckGo, remember, I love DuckDuckGo. It's actually my most popular search engine at the moment, but I also try to supplement it with Start Page, etc., because essentially you're basically getting Bing when you use DuckDuckGo. So I wouldn't rely on any one search engine, but definitely I do look. I think I agree with Josh that that this whole hysteria around fake news means that someone feels threatened. Right, that's why they don't like it, and ultimately you have to trust in individuals to use their own judgment. And if people are stupid enough to fall for fake news, then one has to ask what the individual responsibility is there. But I'm always going to look for different sources of information, use my own judgment to decide what kind of, what the quality of that information is.
Well, I want to give a plug for my favorite news guy right now, and I want to put the link in the chat, and I'll put it in the chat for you guys too. This is called Some More News by this guy Cody. And he's just fantastic. It's kind of a comedy news, I'll tell you in advance. But, oh, he's just so great. I would play some clips, but we'd lose our YouTube rights if we haven't already. But check out Some More News. I guess it's a little left-wing, but it's funny. So there you go. That's my news pick. What else you guys got?
And it's... go
I was going to talk about like information hygiene, but it's a whole meta narrative. Like information hygiene is the concept of like being careful about where you get your information from. So you just said like, oh, here's a YouTube channel, it's a bit lefty. But like if you're right wing, you should be reading left wing news. If you're left wing, you should be reading right. You should all be like exposing yourself to opinions that trigger you, that make you feel threatened.
Exactly.
Because that's kind of
Spot
how
on.
you know what I mean?
Spot on.
So,
They call that the dialectic where I'm from.
But yeah, I didn't know you Hegelian, Ben. Like you should have said, like when we first met. I love that you're like quoting Hegel. So we should talk about the phenomenology of spirit sometime. I should go back to that. I've even got the text on the bookshelf. And when I eventually do learn German, I will be able to read Hegel and Heidegger properly. but that's a future project. So I think that, yeah, the dialectic, you always fight the thesis and the antithesis, and you want to try to find the middle ground. And every person is responsible for finding that within themselves. But if you only ever occupy a filter bubble, like an echo chamber on social media, which Twitter and Facebook are so good at developing, right? They've developed this sticky content because they want you to stick around, because they get ad revenue from that, and they get clicks and views, and that's good to their VC partners and their investors. But actually, what's good for you is information hygiene, which means testing the information that you're getting against independent sources. It might mean that you have to take in some bullshit sometimes, but hopefully you're refined enough that you can filter that out.
Yeah, I agree. And this is the interesting thing about conspiracy theorists, is that they're so hardcore. You pick a few little things. There's always a little bit of truth in there. And that's why I love conspiracy theories, because they delve deeper than, a lot of it's crap, but there's some nuggets of gold.
But but that's a good point, actually, because the most people, I think, that follow like those conspiracy theories, they're mostly in it for the entertainment. Like we have in Britain, we have David Icke. He used to be a goalkeeper, but now he's like a full-time, that's a long time, been like a professional conspiracy theorist. But what
the lizards, man, the lizards.
The lizards
All
people.
the fucking pedo
But
lizards.
He speaks for like 8-hour shows. I mean, who does that? 6-hour, 8-hour shows.
Those, I mean, that length of show, though. I mean, that.
Yeah, you do, Thomas.
Yeah, you do, Thomas.
But this is more true than a David Icke show. But you're right, actually, what Josh is saying about like there's a kernel of truth. But that's actually how the lies propagate. There are big lies wrapped up in little truths. And that's really how the infection happens. That's how it gets into your head, because it resonates with you. There's a little bit of truth, it permeates. And then once it's permeated and it's got into you, then all the lies spill out. And because it's more entertaining and more interesting to opt for the lies, I guess then people start spouting it. And you also have to look out for, what's the other theory in cognitive psychology? I forget the name of it now, but it's to do with, because you've looked for something on the internet, you naturally want to think that because you were so clever and you searched for it, that you found it. You therefore adopt the views of the influencer that you found. So if you go on YouTube and you type in a search term and then you discover something, that person teaches it. Maybe it was even me on World Crypto Network some years ago, and you search for World Crypto Network, you search for Bitcoin, you could be easily influenced because you want to believe that you were clever enough to find the views from that influencer. You see what I mean? And so then you end up adopting that view so quickly and so easily, just because you don't want to believe that you're bad at looking for information. And I forget, if anyone's a psychologist in the chat, pop a message. I forget the title of it. But yeah, be careful of that. Don't just assume that the information that you find on the internet is correct just because you want to feel clever about your searching abilities.
That's
Confirmation bias.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, confirmation bias. Yeah.
Victoria, I think you hit the nail on that.
So sorry to step in. I was just looking at our feed online, and I couldn't help myself but see the Steve Wozniak global scam happening.
Yeah,
right now.
man, everywhere. I'm seeing it too, man. I reported it like 4 times already.
What do you mean, Steve Wozniak
terrible.
scam? I don't
It's
understand.
all over the feed everywhere. If we have any noobs, any newcomers watching here, just do not buy anything from those. I mean,
is it an ad or something they're playing? Like, I don't know what it is.
I mean, he looks normal on top of that.
Oh no, they got Woz? Oh, this is not good.
My favorite.
Well, that's not hard, is it? Right?
No, they've just
WOZ.
They grabbed some conference that he was at and put this QR code, and then
that's a scam, right? So let's not.
Nicely played.
And it's like, look at the views here.
Josh, I wondered where you'd been.
Yeah.
But the problem is, it's not just one feed; it's many as well on the right.
It's many. Yeah.
Wow.
There's a lot of them. I've reported about 3 of them already.
It's terrible, and there's 80,000.
Maybe this is the real new thing that we're going to see in the new epoch is tons more Bitcoin scams. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with a
Absolutely.
Bitcoin scam, man. Like the WannaCry, like that preceded the 2017 pump. Like the reason there was like 25 countries which were hit hard by the WannaCry virus, and uh, it was reported in all those countries. It wasn't Bitcoin's fault; it was the fault of the hackers. But Bitcoin was used because it's just like good money, and then people inevitably ask the question, well, what is this thing called Bitcoin? And they Google Bitcoin, and then you had the Bitcoin search ratings go up. So there's nothing wrong in like scammers using Bitcoin, because it teaches people that why are they using Bitcoin? Like why out of all the choices you've got out there, why are you using Bitcoin right now? It's because as we all know, it's censorship resistant, and it's if you're pulling a scam, then it's the best form of money you've got. But no, I mean, like, I wanted to hark back to something Chris Ellis said. It was about and I think that we kind of like get carried away with the conversation which happens around the internet and what the internet is, and information and access to information. But we should hark back to those utopian like talks on the internet when it first started. Like, this is the information revolution, and it's taken a while, but now people have access to it and they're native to it, and they feel comfortable like plugging themselves into it. And if they want to get access to information, then they will through YouTube, or they'll just Google it, or DuckDuckGo it, obviously, of course. Um, but the information revolution, all those hopes and dreams we had for the information revolution of the internet is now coming to pass. Like, yes, people are confronted with like flat earthers and all this other bollocks, but in that process, they are learning to differentiate between good and bad data. Just as when
That's going to get
post
much
pre
harder.
just
Much harder, Ben.
pre-French Revolution, we had the printing press, and then suddenly people had to like differentiate between what's good and the bad data. Like, now we've got this new thing, the internet, and we have to differentiate between what's good and what's bad data. So sorry, Josh, what were you saying?
No, I was just going to say that's going to get a lot harder. I mean, the deep fakes. I come from a special effects background. I worked for 15 years in special effects. I did some of the shots in the Matrix. Effects are becoming so commoditized now that it's super easy to create something, and that's the scary part. I could create photorealistic effects already 15 years ago, but what's happening now is that anybody can create an effect. Anybody can copy someone's voice. Anyone can copy someone's face.
This is good.
And then tie them together. Whoa! How do you trace information? Blockchain.
Well, no, but this is mistrust information. Like, you shouldn't trust information, even if it looks trustworthy. Don't trust it. Be skeptical of it. Like, it may not be, a legit photo.
Yeah.
And then how do you have like honest sources of information where you have immutable ledgers and cryptography? So
I think the thing is, you can't just rely on one source of information. I think anyone who's relatively intelligent will often go to lots of different sources, and it's when they match up that it makes sense. I think anyone who just looks at one side of a story and because everything's got an element of truth and lies in it these days, and actually the aspect of it that you're most attracted to is very much dependent on who you are as a person and what you're trying to understand about the world at this point in time. And so even if something's a slight untruth, if it piques your curiosity and encourages you to look further, I think there's a lot of benefit to be had from that. But I think the people, and the trouble is, it then becomes really time consuming because you're then obsessed. It's like one piece of information leads to another piece of information, and it becomes never ending, especially in this day and age when there's so much to unravel. But yeah, I think you have to link the pieces of information, and then you come up with a story that makes sense to you as an individual.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But how do you verify if Putin says something that's very inflammatory to the American president? Everyone riles up against it, and I guess the only verification is multiple camera angles.
And also, understanding. I mean, the problem with anything that's said on TV is that it can be taken out of context. So, you get a snippet of information, and then, you stand back and you get, you see the broader documentary, and that starts to educate people as to how you can't just take a snippet of information at face value. So I think anyone who's got any sense will never be swayed by just a snippet of information on the news, and they'll always try and look at the bigger picture. And I think the more that people are exposed to things like that, the more it educates them, and so they're less likely to be fooled. I mean, it'll take a while, and people need to realize that they're being fooled on that extent, but I think it's happening more and more these days.
Yeah,
Nothing.
interesting.
I wanted to say, like, nothing. There is like a strand of philosophy called verificationalism. Nothing exists outside of representation. So everything that comes into the senses by some representation as such. The idea that truth exists only through verification, like I make a claim and the only way you can ascertain its truth value is through verifying it, is just like one theory. But another sort of theme that you can take is that if you want to know if Putin really made that statement, well, first of all, you have to be willing to seek the truth. If you're willing to be deceived, or if you're hoping for a particular value to be true, you might go into that knowledge, that search for knowledge, with a preconceived notion, like the confirmation bias we were just talking about. That could actually leave you susceptible. A lot of the time when frauds or hucksters get you, they usually find a window of vulnerability to climb through, right? They find some weakness in your armor. They tell you a story that you wish were true. But I think that actually, if you are willing to seek the truth, aside from all the which I agree with, like the idea of trying to be empirical, looking for research, looking for evidence-based, I think that's all very valid. But in a world where evidence can easily be cheated, as Josh was saying, I used to work in post-production in the film industry. I know how easy and how cheap it became eventually to reproduce these effects, especially now with like the GAD model, like in AI, to be able to produce deepfakes and so on. I think that you have to be willing to look for the truth. You have to be willing to seek things that are uncomfortable for you. And I think that's what a lot of people have a difficulty with when trying to find information on the internet. They're looking to have that biases confirmed rather than actually looking for information that might contradict what they already believe.
Descartes. Descartes.
Yeah, the birth of modern philosophy, doesn't it say it everything? Like the birth of modern philosophy was René Descartes.
Which is I think.
Yeah, I think therefore I am is the translation.
Start there.
Start there, but actually what he's saying is that everything that you see, you subject to a continuum of doubt. Now, obviously, he said, well, ultimately, we can believe in God, right? Maybe if Descartes were alive today, he wouldn't be theistic. Or he wouldn't be religious,
he said the idea was that all senses and all information which you receive can be all senses and all information which you receive could be corrupt. So can I trust what I see? Can I trust what I hear? Because crazy people like hear voices and not crazy people see stuff. The only thing which I can trust is about the very fact that I'm questioning the fact that I can trust those things.
That
I
think
thinking.
Therefore, but everything else, but everything else has to be subject to a continuum of doubts, no?
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, that stems from Socrates, and the only thing worth knowing is that I know nothing.
Dude, that's us.
Going from the Bill and Ted school of thought here, Socrates, and the only thing worth knowing which I know nothing. The point being that everything which you presume you should question, and then you should intake a lot of information and data to try and figure out whether what you think is true or not true. And
yeah, at this point, you might as well get into simulation theory.
Yeah, exactly. It's true.
Simulacral simulation. Yes, Baudrillard. So, like, what would the?
But it doesn't matter because I think, therefore I am. So what the fuck,
Yeah, but it does matter because, as somebody already pointed out, if Putin makes a statement and it causes World War IV, let's assume that the Cold War was World War III for a moment, and it actually caused the hot war. That does have ramifications. Even if you're in a simulation, presumably you have an investment to stay in the simulation. So, recently, Joe Rogan did his second interview, I think, with Elon Musk, right? And in this interview, Elon Musk blew Rogan's mind by saying in 5 to 10 years, we won't be talking. You know, this is our blase. We won't be talking anymore. We'll just have like synaptic connections and we'll just be able to communicate. If you think about it, a concept in the mind is very intricate and sophisticated. I'm paraphrasing. And Joe's like, wow, you know, Joe does this thing. He's like, wow, what, in 5 years? That's no time at all. Wow. But like, I don't know where I was really going with this, but like the thing is, if you were, what are the ethics of this? Like, if in the future you were put into a simulation which was not discernible from reality, could the company that puts you in the simulation, even at your request or not at your request, not even tell you when you were in there that you were in there? Like, you go in and then you're like, oh, this is real now. Or they could give you 20 years of perceived time elapsed, right? And it feels like 20 years, but maybe your body in this reality, in this simulation is only in there for a few minutes. But it feels like you've been in there for 20 years, so long that perhaps you start to forget your old life. And now you completely adopt this new life. Mind blown, man. I don't know. It opens up questions.
Look, when I put on just a simple VR goggle, and you know it's very basic, I think I'm in a different world straight away, and the the graphics aren't even that good. So
do you know what? Like, you're totally. I've got the Oculus Quest, and I put that on, and I do like boxing training every day, and man, like, I'm there. I'm there. Like, no question, no doubt. I'm there. Like, I'm not even in the room I'm in now. And then I take the goggles off, and suddenly I'm like, oh my God, Christ, I'm here. The brain is incredibly plastic and very versatile, and it can handle like switching from realities. Like, well, look at us right now. We're talking to these crazy little screens, and this is our form of communication. And we have, you know, we understand that these little pictures are actual beings which can communicate information, which we can converse with. So no, the brain's very versatile, but the real worry is that the all of that control and all of that power and all of that information will be controlled by, you know, private interests as opposed to free and open source interests, which would suck. Like, we don't want Amazon and Google. We don't want to step into this virtual simulated world which is controlled by Amazon and Google. We want it to be controlled by users, or at least verified by people, you know, people who can look through the code and understand that nothing corrupt is happening. Because you know, inevitably more of ourself is being poured into a digital world. We need to have control over that. Which is becoming more and more obvious. But yeah, I mean, the virtual reality goggles is a perfect example of that.
I want to just quickly shift gears, because I was on the other channel, and one thing that I find really annoying with Jimmy Song is that he obsessively doesn't understand that you can represent physical goods with digital goods. What do you guys think of representing or tokens that are outside of Bitcoin?
Why is he in Bitcoin if he can't like represent a physical good as a digital good? Like, that's what Bitcoin is. Like, it's just a bunch of fucking data. Like, why, you know, if you don't have trust in the data to be able to secure value, then why are you even in Bitcoin?
I think the trouble with physical goods is that you need someone to actually link it on the blockchain. And so that's the point of weakness. So, you know, Bitcoin works as a form of money because the whole thing has kind of been set up as its own ecosystem in order to replicate a form of value. But when it comes to actually having a house or even a bar of gold on a blockchain, the trouble is you're relying on that third party to verify that that particular block of gold goes with that particular block. And so that's always going to be the weak point. And in many respects, that's the problem with banks, because, you know, they've become corrupt and those checks and measures have been lost. And so it's possible for the similar kind of thing to happen with a blockchain if someone's corrupting the actual entry on the blockchain in the first place. That's how I see it.
Don't look at me. I don't have anything left. It's 7 hours in here. 6 hours and 51 minutes according to the recorder. So
Brilliant.
clicking along.
This is where it all fails now. And
Nice job.
We did. I think it turned out really good. I didn't know if it was going to work at all this morning. I didn't really invite people in advance. That's not something I'm good at. I don't know what time this was going to be. So we didn't know how to schedule when it would be. So we were just like, well, we'll kind of start a couple hours before it starts and we'll kind of invite everybody. So I was just on Twitter and Telegram and even WhatsApp, and I was just copying and pasting the invitation, just see if people will show up. And let's see. Jeremy says in the chat that the last Halvening show was 8 hours long. Let's confirm that. Let's look at that. See, the Halvening show I've got here says that it was.
So dead.
It says it was only an hour and 18 minutes.
Let's bring more people. Let's go.
I invited the audience a while ago. I put this link in the chat, and I agree it looks just like any other link, but it says you are invited to the WCN 2020 Bitcoin Halving Party live show, and it's got the link. You just have to go download Zoom software or whatever it is. Welcome to everyone else's world. I remember years and years ago, someone would send you a random link, and they would say, "Hey, come join my video chat," and it would be Zoom, and you would install Zoom for a couple of days. You would do the video chat with whoever the annoying person was, and then you would delete Zoom. Those were the good old days, right? Before Zoom was your number one thing you needed for all the hangouts and all the social distancing and the drinking at home and whatever everyone else is doing on Zoom now. See, Chris, we were ahead of our time drinking at home on video streams. Revolutionary.
Yeah, we were.
Jeremy has fessed up in the chat. He says it was the Bcash split that was an 8-hour show. The Halvening, it actually looks like a small show now in comparison. We're looking at it here on YouTube. It says that it was an hour and 18 minutes. We were bang in and out of there last time. So I could even play that after this show. I could just throw it on the Halvening show from last time.
Wow.
July 9th,
there I am.
2016.
I still had hair. No, I didn't have a hair there.
Oh, but yeah, we got Josh was there. There he is. Yumi and BTC was here. MZ was here. Look, Mad Bitcoins even. Whoa, Mad Bitcoins. What? And it won't even load the YouTube video because my computer says there's too much stuff going on. I cannot load this. There we go, kind of. If you like low resolution videos. Thanks, YouTube, I guess.
We did MT Gox videos that were 8 hours, I feel like, when MT Gox was you and me.
It was empty.
Yeah.
Definitely some long empty Gox 8-hour things. I think the SegWit launch party was very long as well. And like Jeremy's saying, yeah, the Bcash launch party, that was a long one. That was a really long one. Look, here's Gabriel D. Vine. We sent several invites to Gabriel. First, he said that it was the wrong time. Then he said he had to go to his father's birthday party. So I couldn't get Gabriel on here. Told him that we had Chris Ellis. He was still not moved. Shout out to MZ. We had a good time hanging with MZ last time, but he recently quit the World Crypto Network because Ben interviewed Richard Hart. So, oh well, can't please everybody. Where'd Josh go?
To be fair, that was. I mean, again, I want to expose. So a lot of our viewers, I found this a lot when I went to meetups. They would start talking about Hex and they would talk about Richard Hart and blah blah. And like, I was just interested. I just want to talk to the guy. And like, a lot of those concepts have been able to kind of bake in market manipulation from a very early on in a currency or an altcoin or whatever. I mean, we've seen market manipulation and we've seen ICOs, but have we seen people like baking in market manipulation from the design of the actual asset or the thing which they're designing from the beginning? I don't think we have. Like, and it's something new which we've seen in his thing. So I really wanted to just sort of talk to him about that. And I found him ultimately a fascinating person just because he's been around in Bitcoin for a while, and some of his calls on Bitcoin stuff I've always found them like relatively insightful. So I didn't want to just like completely dismiss the guy. And I found that like these Bitcoin quote unquote maximalist types, they did the Bitcoin a disservice by just dismissing him, because it's like, you know, I mean, I found in my conversation, like I explained some of the good work which was happening in Lightning Network, for example, and like about throughput, and hopefully he'll go and look at that, and some of the worries he had around some of the Bitcoin issues. I don't know, man. Like I think dismissing people and just shouting scammer at them, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Like, talk to them, you know, figure out what they're about. Like, yes, this thing is built to, I mean, we spoke about that openly in that conversation. Like, this thing was built to enrich him, and it was built to enrich, I mean, it's a Ponzi, like it's built to enrich the people who get in earlier than as opposed to the people who get in later. But it's interesting, like what he calls pumponomics or whatever. Like
Pumpamental.
pumpamentals, like
Pump and pump.
yeah, like you've baked in from the beginning market manipulation as opposed to applying market manipulation later on. And I think we'll see more and more of that when legacy, you know, institutions who want to make money, they start using things like Bitcoin, and they're like, okay, we can actually restrict supply in a certain way where we will have, you know, certain economic, we'll be able to get certain economic advantage from being able to manipulate the way in which this thing financially works. So I was just interested in talking to him about that. Anyway, so I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I wasn't like super negative and shouting scammer at the dude. And you know, and fuck it, like bring them all back to Bitcoin, man. Roger Ver, Richard Hart, all of those guys, whatever you think of them, bring them back into the Bitcoin sphere, because this is where they're supposed to be. Like, this is the main event. This is what it's all about.
Well, that's interesting, because I think they're arguing the opposite. They're arguing that they essentially are onto something different, that and that all versions of an algorithm is valid. So
I mean, they are, but they're like him, for example. So, I mean, obviously, he's arguing the thing which is going to enrich him, which is this thing which is designed to enrich him. But like, he's a Bitcoiner. Like, he made it available as an airdrop to Bitcoiners. You know, why not anyone else? Like, he could have made it available to some other chain. Like, why Bitcoiners? Like, he's vested in Bitcoin. Like, he likes Bitcoin. He's a Bitcoiner.
Because he needs a pump. And the pump.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that. You could say
what
he
is
needs
the
like
best pump? No, but
a
he's
community bootstrap. Yeah.
I think it's super clever. And you're
it's
right.
very clever, and like, it doesn't. But you shouldn't just shout scammer it. I mean, like,
I
even
see
if it's
Chris
just a very
laughing. I mean,
Well, look, I think I'm even quoted as saying everything's a scam until proven otherwise. I think that was one of the things that people used to pull me up for saying early on. And I think my gut feel from Richard is that he used to be a presenter on World Crypto Network, right? He used to be someone who could, I think, make videos or certainly be a part of those videos. I think he's a very clever guy. I think he's very sophisticated. He understands people. He knows how to talk. And I think one of the things that I've seen from the very get-go, like I got into crypto, and one of the first things I did is what a lot of other people did, is they got into altcoins. Like Feathercoin was my thing. That was my sin. But it was a well-meaning project, a lot of good people in it. But what I realized was that what people were trying to do with Litecoin, Fairbricks before it, Tenderbricks, Feathercoin, Barbecue Coin, all the rest of it, was they were trying to mimic the gains that Bitcoin had early on. And because everyone regretted that they weren't there at the time when Bitcoin had these huge percentage gains, they wanted to try and imitate that. Now, Ethereum eventually came along, and here's Vitalik's speculation, in my opinion, is that he saw the demand for altcoins circa 2014 or so when he was into Mastercoin. And he thought, well, what if I could capture that demand? What if instead of having to solicit the miners and get the miners to mine your coin and then everyone's competing for hash rate, what if I just create like a meta coin and everyone just gets on my ERC, or as it would like to turn out to be called, ERC20 tokens, then I can sort of claim, well, the end of altcoins, now you can just have your ICOs, right? And you can all jump on here. And now you don't have to go to, we'll deal with the mining, and we'll get all that hash rate. We'll do all the marketing to get that passed. Now, all you've got to do is sell your wares. And I think the problem is every time someone comes up with another altcoin promotion, whether it's an airdrop Aurora coin, do you remember Aurora coin? Do you remember all these other airdrop tokens that went to Bitcoiners? Clams was another example, right? Is that really, they're really just trying to get back to the fact that not everyone was there at the start.
Aurora, was that
And
Iceland? Was that I've forgotten.
Iceland, yeah.
Iceland,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Aurora
everyone,
was Iceland.
this
Maza
isn't
coin was
original.
Native American.
Richard is a smart. So
It's not,
Richard
but I
is
mean,
a smart
so
guy. Like he's a smart guy.
what I would
But
consider a scam to be would be someone saying, this thing is true and honest and sincere, whereas he's not. He's like, yeah, this thing, is designed to enrich me and the people who get in early.
Don't fall for it. Ben, the best way to commit fraud is never lie, man. Like the best way to do it is to say, oh no, I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm talking. The best way to do it is just to be totally humble, right? This is the sophisticated con artist I'm talking about. I'm not doing like your regular huckster.
Years. Stop telling
No, if you go out like look, it's a I'm into PR, I'm into public relations, right? So I do sometimes do self-effacing gestures. Normal, respectable public relations. Say, oh, I'm not an expert. As long as you mean it, that's fine. But I think there's a lot of sophisticated con artists, that there's a theory in con artistry that you can't say that really they're kind of wanting to be duped, they'll be duped. And you've just got to be very charming. Con artist means confidence. It's a confidence trick, that you're really projecting your confidence into that person and you're using your charisma. Now, if you come in and you say, hey, look, this is all just a scam, huh? Like, I'm just here to get rich. And you say that up front. Oh, I guess it's, but Ethereum has had these projects. Like, they've got the transparent Ponzi schemes. That was the only use case of Ethereum that I can tell so far, was like you had these, it's a Ponzi scheme, but everybody knows it's a Ponzi scheme. Ha ha. The whole point of a Ponzi scheme is that it's unsustainable because you eventually run out of buyers, right? So you can't keep selling the thing and selling the thing. Eventually it runs out. So it's completely unsustainable. And I thought that's what Bitcoin was trying to be against, because like the financial system keeps printing money to produce more debt. So where am I going wrong here? Like, I'm trying to figure all this out, and all I can think is we're just reproducing the monster in its own image.
Some people will want to try and make, I mean, this is why, modern investment banking works. Like, some people want to make a profit on their capital, so they put it into certain funds or certain businesses or whatever else to try and make to try and make a profit on their capital. So when I see something like what he's designed, and I think that in the future we're going to have more and more of that, but designed by legitimate players who are much more. I mean, he's fairly fringe, but we will have more and more people, legitimate players, who are designing similar financial instruments which guarantee X amount of increase in value until, oops, there's someone holding the bags. I think that's interesting. Like, that's something we should be, particularly if they're fairly open in the pumponomics or pumpermentals, whatever.
Pumponomics. That's called gambling,
like
dude.
Granddad.
But we already have that.
It's pumpermentals. It's not pumponomics, you fucking idiot.
If you go into a casino, there is a house edge. Like, there are games you can play online with Bitcoin right now. If you want to do that, you can do a martingale strategy on a gambling website with cryptocurrency.
So one of his points,
I'm not a gambler.
A large proportion of Bitcoin's value is speculation. It's people like trying to make money, and like he's saying, well, I'm saying to people, you can make money in this thing, which pumponomics, blah 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 blah. So, I mean, I'm not saying. I just think as a human being, it's very interesting to take like a concept, something, market manipulation, which is something which is an afterthought, and then pre-bake it into something is into a system is interesting. And I think we'll see more of it.
So because
and we should
I'm not
defend
familiar with the
ourselves
project,
against
is
it.
he
And
is he
I'm not
calling
arguing
it a
for.
gambling?
No,
Because if he's calling it
it's
gambling, I
secured
take everything
deposits.
back.
I'm not arguing for or against it. I'm just saying, on our point before about if you want to understand something, you need to not have cognitive distance. You need to be open to it. You need to discuss it openly. You know, your thesis and your antithesis, and then find synthesis. Well,
Yeah.
that happens by not just shouting. I mean, this is the
Not just
problem, right?
scam. Yeah, scam's
Yeah,
a
if you
very
look at- if you-
overused
yeah.
word.
I mean, if you look at the other interviews he did with people, like, you know, like the thought leaders, quote unquote influencers in Bitcoin, were annihilated by him because they had a very sort of narrow-minded interpretation of what Bitcoin is and what a scam is and whatever else. And he was able to intellectually just beat them on those points. And the only person who came out like fairly sort of successful in the conversations with Richard Hart, like, was probably Giacomo Zucco. And at that exact point, he decided to kind of lay down that maximalist mantra and just talk quite openly of, okay, what's this project? What are you trying to achieve? Well, you know, really, what is the value proposition here? Can it not be achieved with this XXX, blah, blah, blah? And that was the best way to approach that kind of, you know, well, scam, whatever you want to call it, but just shouting scam. I mean, it's ogreish, man. Like, and it just it was.
Well, that's why I said just call everything a scam and be done with it. Like, don't even
everything, man.
assume
Bitcoin,
because that points back to the deep. Yeah, but unless it proves otherwise, like don't trust, verify, or trust but verify, which is my preferred version of that statement.
But that takes time.
It
takes time.
Of course it takes time, but it takes time because it needs to take time. I don't know that he put pay. I don't know what the word you used that Richard Hart, you know, put pay to Bitcoiners or maximalists per se, but maybe I just need to research it. I would need to. Well, Jeremy Sager saying Chris Ellis versus Richard Hart when? Well, look, I don't have any beef with the guy personally. I would have to research it. I have to look into it.
That's what I want to see.
But my gut reaction. But my gut I feel like it's a fucking UFC card fucking championship. I would want to look into it, but my gut reaction to all these projects, especially when someone as charismatic as Richard, I know that much about him. I've seen his videos with his, you know, his outfits and his backdrops.
His peacocking. Hey, look, the thing is, I joined when our company went through Techstars, and one of the big things, the big takeaways was, what's the difference between a con artist and an entrepreneur? Both have nothing. Both are selling an idea. It's just that one of those people actually want to follow through with the idea. Now, if that's something that's generally a terrible economic idea, doesn't automatically make it a scam. You want to maybe try an economic theory, and you know this is far better than forcibly having gulags and forcing people into an economic theory, rather than, hey, you want to try out this crazy blockchain. And then there's the total scammers who are like, this isn't going to work, but I'm going to sell it and just walk off.
Bad faith. That's bad faith. They're selling something that you know isn't true. If they've got a different exit in mind and they don't want to sell it to you in the view that you come back later because they just want to sell it to you and then they want to fuck off because they've got another exit that they're concealing from you, then yeah, I agree. That is unquestionably a scam.
And someone might be more educated and think, this is never going to work. He's a scammer. And he might be right in a way because he already knows that, well, this isn't going to work. But it doesn't inherently make this person a scammer. It makes the person maybe a naive entrepreneur.
I mean, you also like by being there, you hold them to account. So I mean, so since I did that interview with Richard Hart, I got like 200 subscribers on Twitter. Now they're going to see a whole bunch of Bitcoin and Lightning stuff on Twitter. And I think the reason in which they subscribed was, or the reason in which they, you know, followed me on Twitter was because I wasn't like aggressive towards him, and like I actually heard him out, and I was like, okay, whatever, you know, blah blah blah. So yeah, I mean, like the people who I don't know, they felt kind of some sort of intellectual superiority because they'd seen Richard Hart like defeat these Bitcoin maximalists. So okay, now I'm just going to invest in X, his thing. Now they're saying, well, okay, well, there's this other guy who's like, okay, he's sort of, you know, interested in you as a personality and he's interested in this thing you've made. And then he's actually arguing that, okay, some of the arguments you had against Bitcoin, like throughput, for example, could be solved through something like Lightning Network. And then see some of the stuff come through on their Twitter feed. I think that's a better way to kind of approach a foe as opposed to just, you know, trying to mute.
Yeah, I'm not
culture.
advocating. I would prefer to live in a world where we have the presence of the scammers than, like Josh was saying, where you impose an economic theory on people and put them into a multi-time zone gulag so they can produce tanks to overthrow the Nazis, let's say. I agree with that. I think that I would prefer, like in philosophy, in my view, you should always, you know, be careful about which philosophy you select based on whether or not you're willing to accept the worst possible instantiation of that, or the corollary of that philosophy, right? So, like the worst possible instantiation of like a neoliberal view or something like this, where you have top-down control, is that you end up with something like fascism, okay, where you end up with top-down control. If all the banks are subservient to the state and they always have to be regulated by the state, then eventually you're going to have this like maniacal operation which can see into everybody. The worst possible instantiation of something like a decentralized system is that everybody has control and therefore nobody has control, and therefore, you know, maybe you have some kind of stalemate or some gridlock, but we'll work it out eventually. Do you see what I mean? And so even though it's kind of the lesser of two evils as far as I'm concerned, I would rather live with a world where people are free to choose. And okay, some people are going to make mistakes, some people might draw into scams, and we should definitely be promoting non-violence and helping those people. What I'm not sure I agree with is that the state should somehow like tax people so that they can instantiate some kind of justice system so that they can protect people from themselves for buying into these scams, like the SEC, for example, like these types of administrative regulatory bodies that end up being quite inefficient, and most of them just want to sell out and go work in the private sector anyway. And then
burn your hand, folks. Burn your hand. Feel what it feels like, and then don't touch that shit again. Nind,
I kind of grok it.
I'd like to hear what Nind has to say about this, because he's a very more on the fundamental side of research and these projects. How would you define a scam? How do you research this stuff?
I'm pushing unmute. Is it working? No, it's not working.
No.
Nindy, unmute. Unmute yourself.
Sorry.
I guess. Sorry.
I saw a interview that Richard Hart did, and the guy asked him where the Ethereum was going, and Richard's answer was, "Oh, you're not meant to ask that question." So obviously, you know, he was pocketing the Ethereum, but scam wise, I don't know. I just see Bitcoin as, I'm not a maximalist, but I just see the purity in Bitcoin, and I think maybe we're a bit early for other technologies, you know, like smart contracts, Ethereum types technologies. I think we're maybe too early, and that's why they get attacked. I think that all that stuff should be built on top of Bitcoin. Maybe like
words of wisdom, man. Like you're 100% right. Like Bitcoin's the answer, you know, but all this peripheral bollocks exists. And then we have to kind
crypto
of deal with
bollocks.
it. The crypto bollocks, the peripheral crypto bollocks exists, and we have to deal with it. But Bitcoin's the answer. Like, nail money, nail value transfer.
Yeah.
Then we'll talk about smart contracting and whatever else you can do with this technology stuff. You know, obviously all the Ethereum, it's just jumping the gun. But people get bought in, and they buy into some of these scams because of the lack of discussion. I think, like, we need discussion. We need to be able to talk about these things. But I mean, I think we will, just like, you know, we had in the .com era, we had a whole bunch of like hope, like the internet's going to be all these things. We're going to have like online streaming, and we're going to have this, that, and blah, blah, blah. And all these companies dump loads of money into it. And there's all these scams, and people made, you know, I personally got some friends who were millionaires from the .com era. And interesting, some of them advised me on some Bitcoin stuff because they'd already seen kind of how the environment plays out, that kind of environment plays out. But the reality is that some of those initial, like some of that initial exuberance which they had in the .com era for, okay, we'll have online streaming and we'll have chatting and we'll have all these features, eventually they become like useful, you know, money making, high commodity features within the internet. And just as some of this bollocks we hear around the ICO world, eventually, after we get the value transfer proposition nailed, they will become useful, functional parts of, you know, the decentralized value transfer network, which we all know and love, called Bitcoin. So, you know, it's like the future is kind of echoing towards us. You know, this is what the future will. We will have these things, and they will not be scammy, and they will not just be money making mechanisms. They will actually be functional things, systems, eventually. But for now, yeah, absolutely.
But the technology is, I think the technology's inert, man. Like, if someone creates a scam on Bitcoin and they create the same scam on Ethereum, it doesn't really matter. The point is that the person is a scammer. He doesn't want to finalize an idea and just wants to pull money out of people.
But when you say a scam on Bitcoin, what do you mean by that?
Well, let's say you come up with a smart contract that can sell investment properties on Bitcoin, and you're going to tokenize that, and you're going to allow that trading on other exchanges, and this and that and the other. Now, people on Ethereum would call it a scam. Now, if the same person did it on Bitcoin, even though you really can't at the moment, people would say, "Oh, that's all right. That's all right." The Bitcoin maximalists would say, "Oh, that's okay." And this is what concerns me, is that that generally people are very on all sides of the spectrum are very maximalist on their chain, and that's about it. And that's unfortunate. I do think there are good ideas on Ethereum. It's just that I think people are so hung up on their chain that they don't want to hear it. And you know, this goes for Hex, this goes for all of them. The ideas might be good, but the chain might be wrong. Maybe as soon as Bitcoin becomes strong enough to be able to handle smart contracts and all the rest of it, not strong enough, but I guess wide enough. You know, RGB's created great stuff, including smart contracts on Lightning. So we'll see what happens there. But my point is, when people start to really take camps on the chain instead of the idea.
I think that it all boils down to security. You know, these massive pots of money that have been built on these chains. If the chain is not secure enough, they're going to get hacked, and then the securest will win. And it's obvious Bitcoin is the securest.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, by far, Bitcoin is so secure, it's insane right now. It's insane. The amount of exahash, the amount of hashing power. I never, you know, I mean, I've been watching this for a very long time, and I really didn't think it would get to this point. Somehow, I just when we're talking, you know, 250 exahash, that's just a phenomenal amount of computing power. It's if you added all of Google's computing power, I know that we're talking ASICs here, but if you pointed all of Google's hashing power, it wouldn't even add 1%. It wouldn't even add near 1%. I don't know. Has everyone else frozen?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, cool.
Oh, I'm listening. What is this?
I don't know. There's a
I
whole
think
lot
Matt
of harp.
Bitcoins is playing the harp.
But guys, I do need to go. My wife will probably kill me in the morning because I need to look after the kid.
Oh, another one bites the dust.
Yeah,
Another one bites the dust.
yeah. Down for the count. But hey, thank you very, very much, everyone. It's just been a wonderful evening. I've really enjoyed it. And Nind, it's great to see you, by the way. You know, and everyone else, Matt and Dee over here. You know, I'm just really, Chris, really wonderful to see you around the house as well. You know, this is one thing that the coronavirus has allowed us to do is get in touch virtually. I'm really looking forward to physical touch again. And